You guys can't leave.
Cheese.
Oh.
Alright, so we're going to talk about feminism. So every kind of group of people that we encounter every day faces some sort of inequality, whether it has to do with sexuality, gender, body shape, whatever it is, we all have some sort of inequality that people share together. So to start with, we're going to go through the history of feminism and kind of the people that impacted that. And then we're going to go through what's happening now, like what are the current issues that we're facing, what are people fighting against now, and then the different kinds of people that are influencing feminism, like the influential people that are still standing today. So not the people that started it, but the people that are continuing it until we get to our final destination point. So as far as the history, there's been so many different people that have helped influence the history of feminism and reaching towards an equality point. And I think it's very important that people know the definition of a feminist, and that is someone who reaches for equality of the genders, may it be men or women. So feminists also fight for the equality of men, not just women. So if a man gets paid less than a woman, women are all for making sure that they're paid the same that we are. Or some of the issues today has to do with paternity and maternity leave, and that's one thing that feminists are fighting for, is the rights of men as well as women. So to start with, in 1848 was the beginning of the Seneca Falls Convention. So there's a lot of women that got together with that, and that started just a big group of women that got together and supported. That's when they were really like, okay guys, something's going on here, this isn't right. And so the main part of that, they were called the first wave feminists. The first wave feminists went more towards suffrage rights. So that was the women's suffrage movement, which it took them until 1920 until we got, it was the 14th Amendment, I believe. No, the 19th Amendment, sorry. The 19th Amendment that had women's voting rights, women's suffrage. So it took them a good 70 years until they were able to hit that point. And that was just the first right of voting. So that wasn't even like that, there wasn't a lot of groundbreaking anything that happened before then. So after 1920, with voting rights, people started, women, and like in the 1950s, they wanted to change the norms of how women were viewed in society. So they were the stay-at-home moms, the stay-at-home, just take care of the house, clean, take the kids to soccer practice, make sure you're all nice, prim and proper, not having anything else in the world, that you weren't working, nothing like that. So in 1950 is where women really started to change that. There was a book written by, her name was Friedan Greer, and she published a book in 1963, I believe, and that's when a lot of people really started getting on, and it was called The Feminist Mystique. So it was like, what exactly is a woman? Just being this kind of person that you have to be this perfect representation of what a woman is. And that's when they really started to fight that feminist stereotype. And they were like, okay, let's go out into the workforce. And they were all for equal pay, equal work, equal rights. So that's the big movement where that started becoming in process, which is what we have today. And then after that, so they started trying to get other basic rights, getting out of the house, and starting to build other rights that were equal to men. They also, it was Margaret Sanger. She was the person who started with birth control. And so you had a lot of these women that were getting together fighting all of these feminist stereotypes, and they were called bra burners. And these were kind of the radical ones, and they didn't actually burn bras, but this is where the term sexism started becoming used in society. So they started getting rid of all the things that deemed a woman a woman. So they were like, this isn't fair. So they started going towards and just getting rid of those things that were either strictly men or strictly women, and they just started to kind of mend that barrier and bring it closer together. So Margaret Sanger kind of jumped in on that and started with birth control. So there's always been this double standard. Even today, we still face it. Men are kind of deemed like top dog, if they sleep with a lot of people, and women are like, premarital sex, don't go for that. And so Margaret Sanger, she was like, women should have control over the pregnancy, because if women got pregnant, it was their sole responsibility to take care of the child. Men were not held responsible for any of it. It was all on women. So she came up and she was like, well, women should be able to be on birth control to at least prevent that, and then women and men are on the same standard there. So she kind of helped bring that. And obviously, she wasn't successful at first. The Pope jumped in and was like, yeah, they're all against any form of synthetic birth control. And society wasn't fond of it at first, but obviously she succeeded today because birth control is very widely used and it's not a big deal. You see a lot of girls are on birth control and it's not this huge, oh my gosh. So now we're going to go into the platforms and what we are standing for today. So as I mentioned, we have equal men's and women's rights. So we have maternity and paternity leave. So women get maternity rights and they get paid maternity leave. There are very few countries that actually offer paternity leave, so that's one of the things that feminists are fighting for, is for men to have those equal rights and be able to have paternity leave. So kind of the implications of not allowing men to have paternity leave, first of all, they're not getting to spend any time with their infant child, which is not good. It's saying that the mother is in charge of raising the child for the first, I think it's 12 weeks of maternity leave that you get generally. And it's saying that women have that responsibility to take care of the child while the man still works, which is not fair. They're not getting time with their child. And then it's also saying that women are the sole carer of an infant child until they can go to daycare or something else. So another one that women are fighting for is equal pay. So there is a 23% pay gap between men and women. And it's been documented. It's even more, it's a greater gap between single moms if they don't work as much. And I do know that some of the statistics do not compare apples to apples, so that is something that people have to keep an eye out for whenever you're looking at this stuff, which is why there's a lot of misunderstanding and myths with the feminist movement, why it's deemed a negative thing. So then next we have taxation. There's actually taxation on feminine products. They are considered a luxury. It's a luxury tax that's on it. But things such as Band-Aids and things in first aid kits, there's no tax on that. You do not get taxed for that. But things for tampons and stuff like that, you are taxed extra for that. I went to HEB and they mentioned that. They're like, did you know you don't get taxed for Band-Aids? I was like, are you serious? So it's kind of interesting whenever you really think about and then it comes up to several $1,000s a year that we pay in those taxes that men do not have to pay for. And it's something that's out of our control, so that's also very discriminatory against women. And then there's also, sorry.
Okay, just go to your third point.
Third point, okay. So that covers a lot of the issues that are standard platform today. And so the third point is just who's speaking out now. And that's Emma Watson's actually a huge supporter, and she's one of the big people in our current feminist movement. And she started the He for She campaign. She's actually a UN ambassador. And then we have the NOW campaign, which is the National Organization of Women. So they are still supporting. They've been around. They were founded in the 1800s. And so they're still around kind of just supporting it, and obviously hands have changed. And there's a lot of other campaigns that are still together, and they're starting new ones. And so there's campaigns and organizations, and it's kind of become a hand-in-hand term. So there's really only one organization, which is the NOW organization, but then all the other campaigns are kind of organizations in themselves. So they have, a lot of it is like the victim blaming the campaign that they're doing with that. And then like the Free Bleeding campaign, which is all sorts of fun. And then just in general, like the sexual objectification of women is another one that we experience a lot of, and so that's why people are kind of standing out towards that. And that's kind of, the NOW is more of an umbrella group of feminism, and then all the other ones kind of go underneath it, all the campaigns that are coming out together. So like the Free the Nipple campaign is another one that's fighting the double standards with sexual objectification of women that's not equal to men. So all of it together is just kind of showing the progression that we've come from 1850, from 1848, the beginning of the Seneca Falls Convention, and then we got the voting rights 70 years later, and then now we're almost at equal pay. And we're almost holding, women make up more than 50% of the population, but only hold 20% of the seats in Congress. So we're not represented equally, but they're fighting for that. More women are going, like Hillary Clinton's running for president. Like that's a huge, huge step for women. So we're all, like it's still just continuing to go. In 1920, we couldn't even vote. Like before that, there was no voting. In 1950, you couldn't even go out of the house unless you had your hat and your gloves. and then now it's like we're on TV, we're you know running for president, we vote more than men, we're out more, you know, so it's starting to become a much more equal ground there.